Barcelona bought the most expensive player in the world and then spent 2 years trying to turn him into someone else. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't even intentional. But it happened. Slowly. Quietly. In the space between what the club expected and what Diego Maradona instinctively was. In the summer of 1982, FC Barcelona paid $7.5 million to bring Maradona to Spain. It was the highest transfer fee in football history. The announcement made headlines across Europe. The president stood in front of cameras and called it an investment in greatness. 90,000 fans filled the Camp Nou just to watch him sign the contract. Maradona was 21 years old. He'd spent the previous year at Boca Juniors in Buenos Aires, where he was loved without condition. The fans there understood him. They knew where he came from. They knew what Villa Fiorito meant. They knew the language he spoke, not just Spanish, but the rhythm of it, the humor, the way respect and affection mixed together in ways that didn't need explanation. Barcelona was different. The city was elegant, structured, European in ways Buenos Aires wasn't. The football was technical and tactical, possession-based, controlled. There were systems, expectations about how a player should move, when to pass, when to hold. The club had history, prestige, an identity built over decades that didn't bend easily for newcomers. Maradona arrived as the most expensive player in the world. That price tag came with assumptions that he would fit immediately. That talent at that level didn't need time to adjust. That greatness translated automatically across continents. But translation isn't automatic, and fitting into a system requires more than skill. The Spanish media covered his arrival like a coronation. Every training session was analyzed, every touch documented. Photographers followed him to restaurants. Journalists asked him about pressure, about expectations, about whether he understood the weight of what Barcelona had paid for him. He smiled in interviews, said the right things, talked about being grateful, about wanting to win, about respecting the club's history. But beneath the polite answers, something was already forming. A gap, not obvious yet, not loud. Just a quiet awareness that the environment didn't quite match what he'd known before. In Buenos Aires, football had felt instinctive. Crowds responded to flair, to risk, to moments that broke structure because breaking structure was part of the beauty. Coaches gave him freedom because freedom produced results. In Barcelona, structure was the point. The system was designed first. Players fit into it, even brilliant ones. Especially brilliant ones, because brilliance without discipline created chaos. And chaos, in Barcelona's philosophy, was something to be controlled. Maradona had spent his entire life adapting. He'd learned as a child in Villa Fiorito to read situations quickly, to adjust to what was expected without needing it explained. He'd done it at home, on the street, in organized football. He thought he could do it here too. What he didn't realize yet was that adapting wasn't the issue. The issue was that Barcelona had never needed to adapt to him. They'd paid a record fee for a player they assumed would fit their vision, not the other way around. The city saw him as an investment. The media saw him as a story. The fans saw him as salvation. But none of them saw him the way Buenos Aires had, as someone who belonged, as someone whose instincts were trusted without question. In Spain, trust had to be earned, and earning it required playing a certain way, moving at a certain tempo, existing within a certain structure. Maradona could do all of that. Technically, he could do anything. The problem was that doing it required suppressing the instincts that had made him worth $7.5 million in the first place. And suppression, when it's constant, doesn't feel like adaptation. By the time his first season started, the gap was already present. Small, manageable maybe, but growing in ways neither side seemed to notice. The club expected brilliance within their framework. Maradona expected trust within his instincts. Both seemed reasonable, both seemed achievable. Neither considered that achieving both at the same time might not be possible, and neither realized how quickly small misalignments could turn into something heavier. The season began with optimism, with belief that talent and system would eventually find rhythm together. What came instead was pressure, then injury, then something harder to name. What came instead was pressure, then injury, then something harder to name. 3 months into his first season, Maradona contracted hepatitis. The club didn't announce it immediately. There were rumors first. Speculation about why he looked thinner, why he was missing training. By December 1982, the diagnosis was public. He was out indefinitely. But the illness didn't create the problem. It exposed it. While Maradona recovered, Barcelona adjusted their tactics and kept winning. The system functioned without him, maybe even better in some ways, more predictable, easier to control. The coaches didn't say it directly, but the results were clear enough. The team had rhythm. They just didn't need him to create it. When he returned in early 1983, he was physically weaker, but expected to perform at the same level. The media had been counting down his recovery like a deadline. Fans wanted the player they'd been promised. The club wanted returns. The league that season was brutal. Defenders targeted him systematically. Late tackles, elbows, hits that came after the ball was gone. Referees let most of it pass. That was La Liga's culture then. Physical play was acceptable. If you couldn't handle it, you weren't tough enough. Barcelona's coaching staff told him to stay composed, to play through it, to not retaliate. But staying composed while being kicked repeatedly required restraint that started feeling less like discipline and more like submission. And the physical targeting wasn't the deepest issue. The deeper issue was tactical. Barcelona played with methodical control. Possession maintained through patterns developed over years. Maradona's instincts were reactive. He saw openings in split seconds and moved without hesitation. Sometimes it worked brilliantly. Sometimes it disrupted their rhythm. When it disrupted rhythm, the blame fell heavier on him than anyone else. Off the field, scrutiny intensified. Journalists analyzed his body language, his interactions, whether he seemed integrated or distant. Every frustrated gesture was labeled immaturity. Every emotional celebration was called excessive. Every moment of silence was framed as detachment. The city wanted brilliance, but it also wanted conformity. Inside the club, misalignment was becoming harder to ignore. Coaches praised his talent publicly, but privately expressed frustration. Teammates respected his ability, but didn't always understand his movements. Passes he expected didn't come. Runs he made weren't anticipated. By the end of his first season, the gap was visible. Not catastrophic yet, but present. Coaches spoke carefully in press conferences. Fans debated whether the investment had been worth it. Maradona gave shorter, more guarded answers to questions. He was still brilliant on his best days. But those days were becoming less frequent, not because his talent had faded, because the energy required to navigate everything around the football was consuming what should have been spent playing it. The tension wasn't resolving, and the physical toll was accumulating faster than anyone outside the club realized. On September 24, 1983, Barcelona played Athletic Bilbao at San Mamés. Late in the match, Andoni Goicoechea came in hard, direct contact. The sound carried across the field. Maradona went down and didn't get back up. His ankle was fractured. ligaments torn. The season was over. This wasn't only about the tackle, it was confirmation that the system wouldn't protect him. The tackle had been brutal, but it wasn't unprecedented. La Liga's referee culture tolerated physicality that would have drawn suspensions elsewhere. Defenders knew this. They adjusted their approach accordingly. And Maradona, despite warnings from coaches to avoid holding the ball too long in dangerous areas, kept playing the way his instincts told him to. Barcelona issued statements of support, but internally the calculus was changing. The club had paid a record fee for a player who'd now missed significant time in 2 consecutive seasons. First illness, now injury. Both disruptions to a system that prized consistency and rhythm. The Spanish media framed the injury as tragic but unsurprising. Some suggested he was too slight for La Liga's demands. Others pointed to his style, reactive, ball-dominant, willing to take risks in tight spaces. The implication was clear. If he'd adapted more fully to the system's discipline, this might have been avoided. Inside the club, questions were forming that hadn't existed before. Whether his approach was sustainable in this league, whether the investment had been miscalculated, whether patience should extend indefinitely for brilliance that came with structural complications. Maradona spent months recovering, isolated, watching Barcelona play without him again. The team functioned, results came, the system continued. When he returned, something had shifted, not visibly, not dramatically, just a quiet recognition that the relationship wasn't what either side had hoped for. Barcelona wanted results within their framework. Maradona wanted trust to play on instinct. Both seemed reasonable. Both were proving difficult to sustain simultaneously. The club's patience was thinning. His tolerance for restraint was wearing. The cultural friction that had started as awkwardness was hardening into something structural. By early 1984, the cracks were visible, not to the public yet, not in press conferences or official statements, but inside training sessions, inside tactical meetings, inside moments that didn't make headlines. The misalignment was no longer theoretical, it was operational, and operational problems don't stay contained quietly for long. On May 5, 1984, Barcelona played Athletic Bilbao in the Copa del Rey final at the Santiago Bernabéu in Madrid. The match was tense, physical. The same referee culture that had tolerated hard fouls all season was present again. Late challenges, minimal intervention. Barcelona lost 1-0. After the final whistle, tensions spilled over. Maradona and several Bilbao players confronted each other on the field. What started as verbal escalated quickly. Pushing, shoving, then a full brawl involving players from both teams. The fight was broadcast live across Spain. Cameras captured everything. Maradona's involvement was clear and visible. The images played repeatedly in the following days. Spanish media framed it as confirmation of concerns that had been building for months. That he was temperamental, that he couldn't control himself under pressure, that his brilliance came with complications the club couldn't manage indefinitely. Barcelona's public response was measured but firm. They condemned the violence, expressed disappointment, made it clear that behavior like that didn't align with the club's values. Privately, the conclusion was forming. The partnership wasn't working, not because Maradona lacked talent, not because Barcelona lacked patience, but because the fundamental gap between his instinctive style and their structured system had never closed. It had only been managed. and management under constant pressure eventually breaks down. Within weeks, it became clear Maradona would leave. The club began exploring options. Maradona seemed ready to move on, not with bitterness, not with resentment, just with the recognition that the fit hadn't materialized the way either side hoped. The transfer to Napoli was finalized that summer. Another record fee, another set of expectations, another city waiting to see if he could deliver what they believed he would. Barcelona had paid the highest price in football history for a player they expected would adapt to their vision. Maradona had arrived expecting the club would trust his instincts the way Boca had. Both assumptions were reasonable on their own. Both proved impossible to reconcile in practice. The relationship didn't collapse dramatically. It dissolved structurally. Two systems that couldn't align. Two expectations that couldn't coexist. A partnership that ended not because either side failed, but because neither could become what the other needed. By the summer of 1984, Maradona was gone, and Barcelona moved forward without him.